Y'all are so picky. People want to hear me, not really. I am Susan Brown. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Accountability at the Coordinating Board, and the Pathways, the project is actually a joint project at the Coordinating Board. It's from the Division of Planning and Accountability and the P16 Division, and we have been working on this for now 2 years. 2 years. It started as a pilot project in San Antonio with the Alamo Community College District, UT San Antonio, and 6 ISDs down in San Antonio, and I don't know all the names of the ISDs, so I'm not going to go there. But it has been a learning experience. We are really starting to take off, and this is kind of a how to get started, lessons learned, all of that rolled up into one presentation. And for those that don't, how many of y'all know anything about the Pathways or have not seen? Okay, we've got one who knows. All right, the Pathways project has 2 sides to it. One side is the data. We get a lot of data from the ISDs, from the community colleges, from the universities in that area. We work with faculty groups, and this are faculties and teachers, faculty members at the higher ed, and faculty from the ISDs. And so it is a locally driven process. It is not something that comes from the state and forced down. The groups work together. There are 4 different groups. We have math, science, English, and social studies. And those faculty groups work together to align the curriculum along with the college and career readiness standards. And so by aligning that curriculum and having the data as the backup for what's going on, where is their misalignment, to help them kind of figure that out, that is where we come in, because we get the data, but the rest of it is driven at the local level. We do it because that way, and they will get into this, there are MOUs to be signed and that sort of thing to be able to share the data. And it helps us provide the information that the faculty groups need. So I'm going to turn this over to Colby Stover, because he is the one who has started it and worked most closely with it for the 2 years. It's one of his first projects as he came to the Coordinating Board, and I think most of the time he's glad he's on it. So thank you very much.
Make this look like a comedy routine gone bad. The Pathways project, basically, I gotta say, as a data person, is the best research project because of the data we generate. But not only that, and really, actually, the data project part of it is the smallest part of it. It's a great P16 project. It really pulls in people to do things like professional development, learn across the different sectors of secondary and post-secondary, to learn about each other's environments, and also then to help solve the transition of students from secondary to post-secondary. And it's a great local initiative. It really is defined in the local area. It is defined on increasing success in the local region. And of course, when things go well in the local region, they go well in the state. And if you're out there on the web, we are also responding to your questions. So what we'd like you to do is go ahead and write down this email and be more than willing to send us questions or comments. And Sue will be signaling us when there are different questions coming on for the presentation, and we'll be responding to those as well. Okay, first off, I'm just going to do a quick review of what the Pathways project is. And really it starts off with this partnership of secondary and post-secondary institutions from all levels of education. And they agreed to share student-level data at first. They want to improve student college success. They want to improve that transition. And the partners basically assign faculty members from all levels to meet on a monthly basis. And I say a monthly basis, really what happens, that's the formal meeting. And then alongside, as the teams start to grow and mature, they start meeting on their own. We have a math team that meets sometimes once a week at regular dinner sessions at their houses. It sort of grows beyond just the formal meetings. Also, the data is then used to generate reports for these faculty teams. And the idea is that this should be data-driven interventions, data that we can look at and pinpoint issues where students are having issues in transitioning from secondary to post-secondary. And then the faculty teams using this data to inform them basically generate interventions and look for points of systematic change as well, designed to increase student success. But where it starts off was with the data collection process. So long before the team members actually meet, we have to go through a whole series of steps to get data to help inform those teams. The first step is with the MOU, and it's probably the first and most critical step. And an MOU is a memorandum of understanding, basically to share data and to engage in the project. The idea here is to get the partners together. The MOU not only acts as a mechanism to share the data, but also acts as a mechanism to gain support for the project, to get the parties together to share this vital information. Once MOUs and leadership agrees that this is a vital project to share data and to launch these teams, we start doing the process of data collection, which is basically developing a reporting manual. And the coordinating board has developed a system that takes these two very different data systems, one from secondary and one from post-secondary, and makes it easy on the institutions to report data to us. Basically, for the secondary systems, we make the systems as close to the PEIM systems as possible, but then gather that extra information teams would need for more alignment. Also, the secondary is aligned to our accountability system at the coordinating board, and once again, adding that extra information, we need information that we don't currently collect in order to make the project successful. And then we go into the data collection phase, and that's where everyone just starts sending us information. And during this time period, we are helping institutions by going through edit checks, making sure the data is fine. Okay. If you can hear us on the webcast, please email us. Or if you're having difficulties, at the email that's currently up on the screen. Maybe it's because I'm holding it up. Can they hear me now? It may just... Okay, that may just because I'm not holding the mic right. All right. So what we're going through is these different steps, the MOU for the data sharing agreement. First, we have developed a reporting manual. And also what I want to say about developing these first two phases is San Antonio played our pilot. We worked out a lot of issues in San Antonio over the 2 years that we started the project. One is that we want a solid agreement with one data share agreement, and anyone who signs the partnership, we want them to share that data equally amongst the partners. All things that have been fixed in San Antonio, we already have the reporting manuals. And the nice thing about data collection coming up is that soon at the coordinating board, we are going to be releasing a new data collection system where higher education institutions will no longer have to produce extra data for this data collection. And I'll explain that more when we get to that section. And then, of course, we do edit checks, make sure the data is clean, usable, and then after the data collection, then we move on to generating those reports for the teams. What kind of data is collected? The data collected for this project is unique, and I would say even unique for the nation. We first collect basic enrollment information, and on top of this enrollment information, we collect different variables that are not normally collected in systems. And we're discovering now we're also asking ISDs and higher ed institutions that if they have markers for special programs that they do, that we're asking them also to include this kind of information in the enrollment file as well. So we can look at projects that are already ongoing, look at their evaluation, and hopefully spread them across the local community. Also, we get course information. Every single course a student has taken is in this data file, and it includes grades. For the secondary system, the real unique parts of this system is the grade component, which is currently not collected by TEA, but will be soon. And also, we collect information on summer courses and night courses that are not often included in the data stream with the Texas Education Agency. So we'll be able to get a complete picture of a student's course-taking pattern. And also, we collect graduation information from all these segments, of course, to get outcomes variables, to see if students are progressing through the programs. Basically, the same data transmission techniques that are used for the coordinating board are used for this project. So the same way where we have to have a password for every single institution, we have a secure transfer system, and all of those techniques in handling sensitive data are used for this project. You can't even get to my office without pressing a little keypad. And also, the coordinating board staff is the only people who have access to student-level pathways information. And that's crucial, that we want to make sure that we're communicating that we're using very sensitive and being very sensitive to data security here at the coordinating board. Now, what do we do with all this data? Well, we start off basically giving the team some standardized reports, just to sort of get the ball moving, to get them to understanding the data, see what kind of data that we have. And the first primary report is about alignment. And basically what we look for is we go into a student's record and we find the highest course that they have taken in a subject area. It can be mathematics, English, U.S. history, or in science. Then we take that student and try to locate them into the higher education system. And we look for that first course they took in that subject area. And basically, using this information, we can look to see where there might be possible gaps in alignment between secondary and post-secondary. This is sort of just a graphic information that we're using right now. And so if someone in high school took pre-calculus, we identify them as taking pre-calculus, we see that they are enrolled in higher education, we then pinpoint what was the course that they took. And we look to see if they were below what would be the equivalent in college for pre-calculus, if they were at the pre-calculus level for college, or if they were above that in college calculus. Now, some of the information I can tell you that we're seeing from the schools is if you take pre-calculus, there's about a 40% chance that you're in DE. So there's something that we can point out as sort of a misalignment in the system that we can discuss. Yes? The question is this going to be linked to the professor at the high school level and linked to the professor at the college level? Sorry, I have to repeat everything. No, we don't do that in this primary preliminary report. We have information that can connect that in some ways, but only at the higher ed level. And we tend not to go into those kinds of issues, but we can signal, like one group actually asked me, what time of day is the course being taught? Which for freshmen might actually be an issue, or there are different rates of success. I mean, things like that we can go into and actually pinpoint the actual section that a student's course was being taken. But what I want to also illustrate is it just isn't alignment reports. That it's anything that the team requests, and there have been a lot of requests out there about different data. Basically, we're defining that everyone owns the data. And some of the requests that we've gotten are cohort studies of an actually very interesting nature, such as the math team wanting to know, if you passed college algebra, what did it take for you to get there? And there were some pretty alarming figures in there about how much of a math delay there was between a student being successful in college algebra. They also wanted to see how, when did they take their last course in high school? And those kinds of information to really help them with these alignment issues. We also did things on predictive modeling. Yes.
So in the way that high school courses
It doesn't get, it could if we had markers for it in the data and if we request markers.
I think they're different numbers.
There are, it's skipping ahead in the Houston user side anyway. They've got the special course codes delineated.
Right.
So that you could tell this was an AP course, this was
Right.
an AP course. So
Right.
they have that.
And we can even define if they were honors or pre-honors courses and all these different kinds of markers. We have predictive modelings that we do also. We also go in and just try to find out what is the most predictive nature. One of the things we did is what is the most predictive math pattern for success? Is it just the end course, or is it what leading up, or how many years you took, how many years in high school you took? That was a more defining issue. And we actually found some considerable differences in different kinds of students' populations on if they were taking math in a different kind of series, and it just wasn't always about what that end course was. We also do many special topics, and in the special topics area, the first one I have is study skills, and that's a project we're currently working on. We look for data from other sources too. If a researcher is engaging in a project at a partner school, we like to access that data, and we currently have a researcher from UT Austin that ran actually learning strategies, questionnaires, motivation questionnaires for the entire freshman class at San Antonio College. And we're trying to take that data, which is very rare in these kinds of large databases, and link it up to our outcomes variables, and then help the researcher and also help the faculty teams identify other issues. We also hit other issues like dual credit, and of course developmental education. We take a focus on that. We research possible interventions. So if a team comes up with us and says, listen, we're thinking about doing this intervention to increase student success, we'll take that intervention idea and research it and use the numbers to sort of give them negatives and positives of doing that intervention. Also, we do tax studies where we actually look at tax information, and currently right now we're engaged in looking at the granular level tax information, where we can actually look at objectives that students have succeeded to see if certain objectives would predict student success. And of course, learning strategies. We've also done evaluation reports for the teams. Some of the teams brought up the AVID program in secondary, and we have a marker for that actually in our databases with the secondary institutions. We can look at secondary AVID and see how successful those students were in post-secondary.
Will that expand with the areas because AVID expands in the post-secondaries it's starting to do to kind of watch and see are those students more successful and they still have that support?
Right, that's a part of the post-secondary AVID research plan. What's nice is that I'm connected with that project too. And a fourth math year intervention. So, you know, students are getting through with Algebra 2. They may need some more help to become college ready. What can we put in that fourth year in high school? How many students would that help? How could we help those students using the data really to get that information? And also something that's being done within the teams themselves. I can't get all the bonus points for collecting data and trying to get data. Some of the teams have actually decided to do high school senior surveys. Really get into their populations and look at what are the issues that their students are having in their separate institutions. And this is happening at the secondary level, where the English team is actually going out and surveying their high school seniors, really to see what their issues might be and success. Now, big slide, but I really want to illustrate how we do this kind of reporting cycle and where the information is really flowing from and how we're generating these reports and why we're generating these reports. It starts off with the coordinating board generating a preliminary report, something to get the conversation started about data, about issues that might be in alignment, and then basically the faculty team members review the report. And you know everything that happens with data collection. You give out a report, the first thing that happens, people review it, they read it, and there are always more questions, and that's great. That's what we want to happen. So we want them to send back questions going, this was great, but I would like this information broken down by this demographic variable. Oh, can we see a real good focus on these students? They seem to be the vast majority that are having the difficulties. And we go right back and generate a report. And so there's a constant back and forth between these two blocks. Matter of fact, when a report is generated for the pathways, I always put it out as under review. And the idea is that, yes, it is a complete report with good information, but the idea is that it's a growing and living document that should not be viewed as something that cannot be changed or enhance the team's experience with the data. Using this data, then we would like the teams to use to develop possible interventions. And then we want the teams, when they start developing information, is to request more data. We got an intervention idea, we've gotten it focused down to what we're going to be work on for maybe a year or 2 years. Can you please send us data? And also, while they're generating this interventions, are engaged in these interventions, then we are using the data to show how successful they are, so that we can give regular reports back saying, you know, ever since you started this intervention, then we can start giving them data and being an effective sort of evaluation tool to give them information about tweaking programs, making them better, or show their complete success. That's something we talk about in reports. We often give institution-level reports. We learned quickly in San Antonio that faculty teams are very interested in individual-level reports, going down to the ISD level, being at the campus levels in higher ed. And this is important also because we can see different kinds of student populations in different institutions. And also, a lot of these institutions are running programs right now. And we want to know about them as part of the Pathways project. And so we want to identify those successful initiatives that are happening maybe just at one ISD or maybe even just one high school, so that we can spread that information, the success of that program, across the entire region. And here's a key note. Pathways does not compare institutions. We are really into local interventions that increase entire secondary to post-secondary student success, and we sort of block all that talk when we're in meetings. Another main issue that I stress with reports and the data is data ownership. And I consider it one of the most important issues in Pathways is that data ownership is important to the Pathways process. And the data is not owned by the researcher here at the coordinating board. It's owned by the teams and the partners in the local region. They're the ones who make the agreement, get together, make that commitment, and we want to make the teams to feel like data reports are being generated due to their will. That whatever questions they have, whatever concerns they have, whatever information they need is generated. It's like having their own mini IR department. That they go in, they request information, and they receive reports. And to just give you sort of an example of generating this kind of data ownership, the San Antonio math team has really taken data ownership. We had an original alignment report that only had 5 tables, and it went up there as sort of a review document, and then all of a sudden it became 25 additional tables. They wanted different information. They wanted to see different kinds of interventions that they were thinking about and what the data was behind them. It really grew that they understood this concept of data ownership, and that's very important in these projects, that they understand the data is theirs. Okay. Data is nothing without the teams. They are really the heart of the Pathways projects. The data is just a support mechanism, something to help focus teams and help them affect change in their local regions. They really are just the core of this project. Faculty teams identify possible local roadblocks to student successful transition to secondary and post-secondary. And also the faculty members are often encouraged to focus in on local vertical alignment issues, but not just that, local issues to transition of success from secondary to post-secondary globally. The local focus issues so far in San Antonio and Houston teams have been mathematics, English, U.S. history, and biology. However, in Pathways Project, we don't feel that that's a strict information. Whatever the local area needs to focus in on and feels that we need to focus on these different points and processes, we encourage that We encourage them to think about different ones. And there have been some talk in one of our newest teams in the Rio Grande Valley of having a career technical team that might actually, that is focused in on that area. And that's what the main thing about the Pathways Project is. Teams should be really focused in on issues that are of local concern. Okay. This is one of these bullet points that maybe I should have broken up into a few slides, because really there's more information here. But the Pathways teams are supported by first the regional coordinator. And you'll be hearing a talk from a regional coordinator. They are really the organizers, the communicators, the people who keep people on task. And we tend to look for people who are retired from that same system. People who want to dedicate time to increasing that local effort. And we try to look for information and get information, and these are our communicators. These are the people who communicate to the coordinating board for the data aspect and coordinate and talk to the local leadership. Pathways teams meet once a month. Like I said, this is just a rule for the formal meetings. And initially, the Pathways teams are centered around team organization and faculty reports. Really getting to know each other, start talking about the differences between secondary and post-secondary, really talking about what are the issues that people are seeing in each other's classrooms, and getting down to that more micro level that a lot of times administrators aren't seeing. We hear those voices come out more. And then the faculty teams are charged with the development and systematic policy change for all education levels to better align secondary and post-secondary. I like putting this one up. The benefits of having a Pathways team. Local regions benefit, I benefit. They provide a ready vehicle for projects. So if there's a project that needs to focus in at the classroom level or with faculty members, they're a point where we have contact with the people who are doing the work in those institutions that are doing regular meetings. Also, it's a great way to disseminate information. So at the P16 Vision, Christian comes down, does speeches about what are the different projects that we're doing, so we can keep everyone informed and keep that knowledge going through the system. I put this one as a researcher. Faculty teams are great at identifying weak points in research and education. Sometimes they don't even know they're doing it. When I listen to a team and I go, okay, this is a great study to do, this is something we really need to focus in on. Faculty teams are very creative. They often jump outside of the normal boxes. They think about different issues, and we get different information. And the most important thing is the faculty teams are on the front line. They're actually teaching the students. Most of these faculty teams are made up of teachers who are teaching those higher level in high school courses. So those English 3s and English 4 teachers, and English, for example. And then in higher ed, those are our DE teachers or intro level teachers actually at these meetings. I'm not going to go too much into this because Tripp is going to cover it, but I just want to sort of highlight that there have been early on successes in this program, that teams have taken some initiative to really get together, communicate different information about their classrooms, bring together their syllabi, visit each other's classrooms, survey their seniors, and basically developing meaningful and effective communication. And that's one of the main goals and even one of the challenges within the Pathways project. And I'm just going to sort of go through this because Tripp is actually going to be discussing what actually happens on the ground. What are the issues within teams? But this is the main primary focus or process of the Pathways team. It's a circular cycle that faculty teams design and change interventions, faculty teams start those interventions, and then those interventions are evaluated with data. And then we continue the cycle. And with having such a large data piece and a data piece that's connected to it, that we can focus in all this different information, not only from what's collected from the Pathways program, but also collected by statewide. We will use our databases at the coordinating board, information that we have that is extra, that may not be attainable to these local regions, to produce these reports and file these reports. Okay. Why do we do all this data collection? And I'm going to show you actually what's considered a very, very small part of an alignment study, an initial primary report. And I'm going to focus in on Algebra 2 students, those students that pass Algebra 2 and then go on to a higher ed institution, and pinpoint what are the issues that these students might be having. Before I go into discussing this, the blue line represents that real success barrier, and that represents a college-bearing course versus a non-college-bearing course, or our DE courses. And in this slide, these categories, the basic mathematics, represent 2 courses. So a person in this category would have to take 3 to 4 semesters of developmental math if they successfully completed in order to get into the credit-bearing course. In intermediate algebra, they would have to take 2 to 1 semesters of developmental education. And here's basically the highlight of the information. That if you successfully pass Algebra 2 in high school and then are enrolled at this 2-year institution, there's 83.3% likelihood that you're going to end up, and this is actual raw numbers, in DE. And let's think about the more shocking other side of that. That 11.7% are only getting into the credit-bearing course. And yes? There are a lot of fundamental differences. I mean, there's observational. Yes. Yes.
You may see less of a difference with it in the course.
Right.
It's something that me who are locally and haven't yet got myself an educated
is that I think the large majority of our students who meet the college readiness standard have gone way beyond Algebra 2. And so I'm not promising anything to anyone, but I really, really think that if you look at the kids who meet college readiness standards right now, Algebra 2 is not that. Now, it's supposed to be coming up, but right now that's not it. And so
Right.
every time I see this, I kind of go, yeah, and
Well, I mean, and I would say there's other data that would pinpoint pre-calculus isn't doing it either. Yes. I would say pre-calculus isn't doing this either. The numbers show pretty similar results. And actually, the results that we're showing is that to really have most of your students, it's calculus in these course-taking patterns. You know, AP or IB calculus. But what's interesting, though, is that as a matter of policy or a matter of information, that the students in this institution represent 50% of the students that are coming in to their institution. So it's a vast majority of their students that are going into these math courses are coming out with the highest course being Algebra 2. Yes, sir.
I'm curious, tax is used as a waiver for math and for other areas. I mean, just completion of Algebra 2 is one factor, but do you have a marker for tax scores, 2200, and have you looked at that factor as opposed to just Algebra 2 completion?
Yes, we have. We have looked at that information as well. We show that it's not the best marker, because first of all, institutions may not be using that marker. So they will be using their own Accuplace or Thea.
Well, we have no choice. We're required. The waiver is a requirement, right? Unless I'm misunderstanding it.
There might be, but we know that institutions are regularly not using the tax information to do exemption.
Well, okay.
I mean, it's, yeah. We have students who have achieved that 2200 mark in mathematics that are NDE because of placement exams.
But I'm just curious about that because that brings another point up. We did the P16 math project, and one of the issues that arose was that students often get to the 2200 by way of special classes, prep classes, and so forth. And I'm not going to claim it's not a legitimate way to get to 2200, but it also is a marker that you should look at, because if a student gets to 2200 that way, it's different from truly following a successful curriculum pattern.
Well, and these are definitely conversations that are happening within our faculty teams, talking about Algebra 2 as being, because it's that 11th grade year, as being more of a review to get students up into the tax information, and that some of the information that would maybe needed is going to be maybe in there now that we're going to have an end of course. So there's been conversations about that in the faculty teams, and issues like this have been coming up as things for possible systematic change. And what we're basically trying to do is get them a voice to show these issues. Okay.
Are these students just from San Antonio?
These students are from different regions across the state.
So it's not from the San Antonio?
Right. We do not identify institutions in these kinds of reports and information. I mean, basically, we're doing this as a informational session, but soon, like I said, we were going to have this for the entire higher ed system. That's going to be a part of our accountability system when our new course schedule comes up. So it also, Pathways is a way to show, like, this is the kind of information that might be coming through. Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, those are different programs. So this is where it starts, but one of the main things people ask is, okay, this is the overall body of the population. This is everybody who took Algebra 2. What if you reach that 90% complete, like your main A in your Algebra 2 course? So these are kids that have reached the A level in their Algebra 2 course and still at 73.5% are being placed in DE. And the vast majority are actually being placed in these basic mathematics courses, meaning that 3 to 4 semesters of DE is being required. B, 84.7% end up in DE. C, 91.8%. And for this population, this is the vast majority. Actually, the C group actually represents 60% of this entire population, this people who passed Algebra 2 and are now enrolled in higher education. So this is the group that really needs to be focused in. And this is the micro level that the faculty teams and the partners receive in information to show this. And actually for the B group, it's 32.7% of that entire population, and the A group is only 7.2% of that population. Right. Oh. Yes, these are students whose Algebra 2 is their last course. And what I really want to do here is show impact. These are actual whole numbers. And we can say where most of the impact is happening is with students who had a C in Algebra 2 who are now enrolled in courses. Now, the more alarming information, this is the success rates. This is if you successfully completed that first class that you took in mathematics, and after you had passed Algebra 2 in high school. And you can see the A's pass at about a 60% rate. The B's even lower, lower than 50%. And the C's are about 40%. So they're not even really getting out of these basic level classes. And the idea here is to pinpoint these issues to the faculty teams and to highlight where the concerns might be the most. Actually, and also the withdrawal rates in these classes are rather high. For an A student, it's about 18%. For a B student, it's 24%. For a C student, it's 27%. So students are getting into these courses and withdrawing. And at such a high rate, we can't say that it's just for personal issues or issues that are happening. We got to assume that we need to probably go in there and investigate why these students are dropping out at such a high rate or actually withdrawing. The story is a little bit different in four-year institutions. In this graph, basic mathematics only represents one course, and intermediate algebra represents only one course. However, we also got to remember that four-year institutions often send their DE students to the two-year institutions. But even at this level, we see that 59.2% of these students going into four-year institutions who have higher enrollment standards are going into DE. A students, 44.9%. B students, 54.1%. And C students, 67%. And once again, to show you the impact, once again, the largest impact is on those students who made a C in Algebra 2. Looking at this population of students who passed Algebra 2 in high school. Yes?
So what is the percent of students whose highest math course level?
Actually? Oh, whose highest course is 50% in the two-year population. And did I calculate it for the other one? Roughly 33% in the four-year institution.
So, of those who entered community college, half of them's highest math course was Algebra 2.
Right. And this is to also focus these teams on the populations that they're currently dealing with. So we want to give that kind of information. What was the highest level course? And this also breeded, like in the math program, that there need to be a fourth year kind of course that would get these students into college readiness.
So you're saying that the state board's action to weaken the math expectations in the recommended program is counterproductive to college readiness?
I am not saying that. I'm a researcher. I get the numbers. Draw conclusions as you will. But as we see at the four-year institutions, the pass rates are high. But I also just want to reiterate this, that in a lot of these institutions, the four-year institutions are actually sending the DE students to two-year institutions for that kind of remediation and for the DE. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Kristen Kramer. I'm the data aspect here at the coordinating board with the Pathways Project. Kristen is the P16 connection. We sort of co-together to develop projects, develop information, communicate things with issues with the state. She's going to tell you some of the ways that how you really start a Pathways program.
Thanks, Colby. Colby has the really exciting part of the presentation, the data. What we're going into at this point are just the steps that you need to go through to start a Pathways project. And I'm realizing that the PowerPoint up here is a little different than my notes, so we'll weave our way through. Of course, the first part is to get some folks on board. Who is interested in creating a Pathways project? Is there a will? And then getting in touch with us, Colby or myself. Then it's securing the commitment. Often it's difficult to bring in the district personnel all in one setting. We have found that going through the service centers, meeting with them and the superintendents or the assistant superintendents who come, tends to be a good way to get everybody in the room at the same time. Then there's the question of funding. The Pathways project is actually relatively inexpensive. We'll go into some of the places where money is an important consideration, but of course most of the data, part of it that's a cost that the coordinating board shoulders, but of course there's some personnel involved at the district level. The commitment, we're taking out a few steps and highlighting them, some of the ones that are most important. Commitment is very important. And this is commitment by the leadership of the institutions that are involved. The leadership needs to be committed to supporting the teams, supporting the faculty, supporting the coordinators to do their work, and be willing to act on the data. As you've already realized, there's some uncomfortable data out there. This also means being willing to take some risks, whether with innovations, interventions, but also questioning some maybe long-standing policies. There's also the required commitment by the faculty. This is quite a commitment. Meeting regularly over time, once a month minimum, typically. Also, this willingness to act on the data and to take some risk in their thinking, bring information back into their work in the classroom, communicate with their leadership. Resource allocation, a nice way of talking about money. Coordinators are probably, outside of interventions, one of the primary costs. We really strongly suggest, again, this is a locally owned project, but we strongly suggest that the coordinator only have one job, and that job be pathways. So typically, as Colby mentioned earlier, it's typically a retired, someone retired from the system who is interested in doing part-time work, although Tripp will probably tell you it's really full-time work. And this person is key. If you don't have a strong coordinator to help bring people to the table, as well as help facilitate conversations, keep people on task, communicate with the leadership, communicate with the coordinating board, things can get a little derailed. It's very important to have a strong coordinator. Support staff at the institutions, at the districts, I'll say at the coordinating board. These are some of the, we'll say, hidden costs. Some Pathways projects also do faculty stipends when that's possible within the way the institution is funding the project. Or there at least needs to be buy-in to give faculty some release time, perhaps, to make some meetings, to spend more time on the project. Then there's the indirect cost of data collection. Time that your folks at the district and at the institution spend in collecting the data, submitting it to us, the time here at the coordinating board. Data storage, which I think Colby has an actual number on what that typically costs the state. Yeah, and we consume that cost. And then this would be the next big cost, potentially. There are a lot of cheap interventions out there, but there are also some that are take a little bit more money. I know that there are Pathways programs that are considering applying for grants to do particular interventions. But it's something to keep in mind if you were starting out. Consider that from the beginning. What sort of resources do we want to start thinking about going after in order to support interventions? The next step is to designate a fiscal agent. This is typically one of the colleges in the partnership. And to develop an MOU. This is a bit of a misnomer, the develop an MOU or a contract among partners. Because typically we actually have an MOU that has been approved through our system, that we've figured out some of the chinks and ironed it out, and we have a standard MOU that we suggest people use. It's important to know if you want to create a different MOU that it has to go through our system first, wind its way through, get everybody's approval. So in some ways it's almost easier to go with the standard MOU. You kind of get ahead of the game a little bit. And everyone has to sign the same MOU. Not the same piece of paper, mind you, but the same agreement. Everyone is sharing information. And this, as Colby mentioned, was figured out in San Antonio. It really didn't work to try and keep these things separate. One item that is not listed here then, that's part of this process of the MOU is designating the data contact at the partner institution, so the person who will be gathering and submitting data, as well as the program contact. There needs to be somebody at the school or at the institution who is responsible for getting people to participate, designating faculty, being the liaison between the partner institution and the rest of the partnership. And then it's hiring a regional coordinator. Again, we cannot stress enough how important this decision is. We have a job description that has been shared among participants in the collaborative that seems to be pretty right on, that we'll share with anyone who's interested. The coordinator communicates among all of the institutions, coordinates the project, facilitates the team meetings and the work of the faculty, and is the important liaison among all the stakeholders in the project. Also, the coordinator, along with us at the coordinating board, really try to look at what are existing resources out there, existing projects, other human resources that we can leverage to improve the project. The MOU. Establishing the partners. There have been conversations, at least in the Valley, about including the P16 Council in the MOU, although I don't think they've gone that direction. Whether the Education Service Center should be assignee, as well as reaching an agreement, and this is something that can change over time, certainly, and doesn't actually have to be in the MOU, but it's part of that process, is deciding where are we going to focus, what content areas. As Colby mentioned, San Antonio, and actually both Houston and San Antonio, are focusing on the 4 content areas. The Valley, I think they may do a CTE, but they may also just focus on English and math. And sometimes we encourage folks to not be overly ambitious maybe in the first year, that there are some benefits to being really focused in which content areas they're going to look at, maybe build out over time, bring in more districts over time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Yes, ma'am.
Has there been any
No, that's on.
Okay, any discussion about including workforce development, economic development, councils, trying to really bridge that gap between the educational outcomes and the workforce?
As I understand, yes, there was conversation about this in the Valley. I think there's the question about, and Colby will know this better, around the data collection part of that. Do you want to say something about that? The workforce data?
Yeah, we have workforce information here at the coordinating board that we can tie into this information. There's been a lot of discussion about tying in, where are students being employed, what are the resources they're receiving from getting these degrees, what kind of jobs are they employed in, and there's been some discussion of different reports like that in the Valley.
The last thing is the determining the budget and the funding streams and how will costs be shared. Again, this is something that may not necessarily be included in the MOU per se, but is part of that conversation. Utilizing the existing grant to get off the ground, perhaps. Houston is funded by the Houston Endowment. There are a variety of ways to go about it. Again, we stress again, all partners sign the same MOU. One thing that came up too in a conversation that Colby and I had the other day was, while we encourage the faculty teamwork, that this really seems to be what the Pathways Project, the vehicle of the Pathways Project. We discussed how it would be possible to say that maybe the superintendents or the assistant superintendents get together with representatives from the institutions, and that ends up being the Pathways team. It doesn't the model that we've been working with is about faculty teams, and there's a lot to be gained from that, but it's not the only way to do it. So there are ways to think about how can we use this data, but there has to be some sort of human engagement with the data and a willingness to act on the data. Who those humans are is probably up to the region to decide. So how can the coordinating board help? So a lot of these I've already mentioned, that we can provide an MOU, provide the coordinator job description, as well as some lessons learned. We have lots of lessons learned, or are learning, I should say. Tripper will mention some of those, as well as specific things that have arisen out of his experience with the pathways in San Antonio. But I also would say that almost every meeting that Colby and I go to, we come away with a new lesson of one sort or another. Also, the coordinating board will provide the data collection template and these data manuals that also Colby keeps perfecting. We will collect and aggregate the data, FERPA compliant. Again, to stress that there shouldn't be any fear on the part of the partners around data security or FERPA issues, that this is something that we've, as a state agency, have definitely ironed out. And then we develop the data reports. They come to you or they come to the participants as PowerPoints. And at this point, too, Colby has, and with help from others here in the coordinating board, has developed the SharePoint system as a way to both request and receive these reports, so it's becoming much more seamless, that process. And then we're also well suited to support collaborations among and across the various Pathways projects. We've been in discussions about bringing in coordinators to work together to here at the coordinating board to produce a manual of sort of how to survive the first year, what's the information that participants need to have in hand. And lastly, and this is mostly my role, is identifying resources that can be leveraged for the partnership. Both whether we have parallel or projects going in the area that we can then connect. We've got connections with various personnel at various points, either at the state level, regionally, locally, and trying to bring these people together to work in tandem. And I think we may be over, yes. Dr. Stover's and my email address, if you have any questions. Oh, what? Yes, if you have any questions during the break, go ahead and email Colby. He's got his email box open, and we'll receive any questions, and we can answer those after the break. 15 minutes? Then we're going to do about a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back on with Trip Presley to talk about some lessons learned from San Antonio.
All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started again, and we're going to go into Trip Speech, where we're really go into challenges with teams and getting teams to do the work of the Pathways project. And without further ado, Trip Presley is our regional coordinator in San Antonio. He came in with us in December and has been great. There's only way to define it as great. Really got the teams together, got organizational patterns going, and he's going to basically just sort of go through some of the things that he's learned as a regional coordinator.
Thank you, Colby. It's really an honor for me to be a part of a project like this, and I want to start by thanking coordinating board and Dr. Leslie and the Alamo Colleges, anyone who had the vision for pursuing a project like this. There's no question it needs to be done. I was actually blessed to be in the right place at the right time. About 8 years ago, the A&M system reached out to 3 school districts in the south side of San Antonio, East Central, South San, and Southwest, and and invited us to become a part of a P16 initiative. So this is not my first experience in this kind of work. I learned a lot from that experience, and it's given me some insight about what the challenges are anytime we put people from two very distinct and diverse systems together in the same room. It's been my experience that these kinds of projects can be a tremendous have a tremendous positive influence on change, and so it's exciting for me to be associated with such dedicated professionals from both sides of the educational system. I think we would be remiss if we don't think about, though, what some of those challenges are. You need to anticipate those things as you go into a project like this, as if you don't, there's going to be some time wasted, and you might take 2 steps forward and 1 step back occasionally. So let's look at some of the challenges that we have as we begin a work like this, and I think we have to think about the fact that we have to accept the fact that there's a governance divide. And this is a huge issue because when you have 2 separate systems who for so long didn't make any effort to reach out and talk to each other, things went down the road and everything went really well until about 15 or 20 years ago, and the world started changing, and we moved from an industrial age into an information society, and all of a sudden somebody said, you know what, K-12 is just not good enough anymore. Kids need post-secondary education. They all need it, really, to be productive citizens in a global economy, in a high-tech society. And all of a sudden we became aware of the fact that the system that we had in place in K-12, and I was a part of that system for 30-plus years, sometime around 20 years ago, something called House Bill 72 was passed, and then Senate Bill 1, and then No Child Left Behind. We've constantly moved toward a place where we woke up one day and said, guess what? You know, this system that we have in place, it wasn't really designed to produce these kind of outcomes. And that's a reality that hit us pretty hard. We started working really hard to transform a system that didn't produce high achievement for all kids. Phil Schlechte, I think, has articulated it very well. I think he's right. That system was designed to sort and select kids, and it did it very well. But when you make the transition from a system like that to one that demands that all kids be college ready, something's got to change. All of our focus in terms of accountability, for the most part, has been on the K-12 system. But as long as we exist in an environment that has this government divide, it's a challenge for us because there's so many things that are so different about the 2 systems that sometimes it makes the work very difficult. There's another kind of divide. That's one I've come to call the cultural divide. I think I heard someone talking about this in the audience a while ago. When you put post-secondary teachers and K-12 teachers in the same room, somebody had better have thought out how that's going to go ahead of time, or it can get really tricky in a hurry. And the reason is that those folks, if you've grown up and been a part of the K-12 system your entire career, or if you're likewise in the post-secondary system, you just don't think the same. We come from 2 different worlds. The K-12 system is student-centered. It's focused on success for all. That's how we measure success, in spite of the fact that we all understand the need for kids to be college ready. The accountability system is focused on high school graduation and a one-time event. So that's not the same as college ready in all cases. In our system, and I say that's the one I came out of, the K-12 system, there are support services at every level for kids. We've figured out if we're going to transform ourselves from a system that sorts and selects to success for all of them. We've got to provide services for kids at every level. We have mandated standards. We don't have any choice about them. That's something that we had to keep reminding the post-secondary folks of in this work. And we're accountable to two systems, not one, but two, state and federal. Whereas on the other side of the cultural divide, we have a system that really is not focused so much on student success as just providing an opportunity. Students have to seek support services. I have a daughter right now in school in California, and she's not unlike most kids who struggle in their first year of college. Extremely intelligent, knows exactly what she needed to know in terms of her preparation as far as coursework goes, but she struggled immediately when she got into the system. And it took the better part of 8 or 10 phone calls on my part to find the support systems that were in place, readily available to support her, but they made no effort to share them with the kids. And so now that we have those support services in place, she's doing great. But that's a systemic problem that really, in a lot of places, still exists today at the college level. Kids get lost when they get there. The other huge difference is there are a few agreed upon standards. Joe Laser, a good friend and colleague of mine in San Antonio, has been trying to align college algebra standards in the San Antonio area for going on 2 years. He's still working on it. It's not an easy thing to do. But I think ultimately, if this kind of work is really going to have meaningful impact for the future on large numbers of kids, that's an area that's going to have to be addressed. And then, of course, we have a focus on academic freedom at the college level. And I've had several conversations with folks in this work where we had to talk about the difference between the meaning of academic standards and clear outcomes for courses. Sometimes they seem to get confused about that. Yes, ma'am. Further. Okay. The K-12 system, of course, we have to take into consideration accountability. It's something we can't ignore. And we have multiple assessments at every level. We really are focused on curriculum standards, clear standards, teacher quality. There's a strong emphasis on instructional improvement and teacher accountability at every level. We are almost overwhelmed by the number of assessments that we are required to give, and but we also understand the importance of building in formative assessment, and that's a huge cultural difference from the secondary to the post-secondary level. We had a conversation just the last couple of meetings about a college professor saying we need to go into those high school classrooms and explain to the kids that when they get to college, they're going to probably have 2 grades. There will be no extra credit. When you finish completing your 2 tests, your grade will be fixed. So there's a whole cultural divide there when it comes to assessment between the 2 systems. At the K-12 system, our focus is on 2 types of assessment, for and of learning. We spend a lot of time focusing our attention on assessment that improves student performance, whereas at the college level, assessment is basically viewed as an end event. It's summative in nature. And so when you look at these differences, you've got to take those into account anytime you begin to think about starting a project like that. You've got to anticipate that these things are there, and you're going to have to plan for it. So let's talk about some of the successes and lessons learned. It's probably not, if you've been involved in anything like this, you know that this can quickly generate into a blame game. It's really important when you bring these two groups together up front that you start by doing some team building. We've got to make sure that when we bring these two groups together that they are aware of the purpose for their work, and we need to establish some really clear norms to make sure that the communication is effective. Otherwise, it's just a natural human tendency for people to get defensive when somebody makes a comment, unintentional in nature, never intend to offend anybody, but it hits somebody right in the heart, and that can spark controversy in a hurry. So you really need to focus on team building and providing some training for effective communication practices before you start the work. We have a real visionary group in the ELA Pathways Professional Learning Community. The co-chair in that group saw a need early on to create norms, and she created norms probably in the first few weeks after she saw what was happening, and most of those issues soon went away once they agreed upon how they were going to talk to each other. Other groups, it took a little longer. I want to say that I wasn't here in the beginning, and so a lot of what I'm sharing with you I learned through conversations after I came into the project in December. One of the first things I did was go and visit all the district coordinators, because the biggest concern I had early on was a lack of attendance. Our groups started out with 20 to 22 participants in each of the 4 committees. And by the time I became a part of that project, those numbers had sometimes shrunk to 10 or less. And in order for this work to be effective, it's really important that we have balance in the teams. It's important that we have people, large numbers of people, because the synergy that comes from more people thinking about a problem, the more likely you're going to have innovative solutions and strategies to problems. This is a real issue. When you're trying to do this work, these guys come to us at most of the time 5 or 5:30 in the evening. They walk in and you can see it on their face. They're tired. They've driven in rush hour to get there. They've been working all day in their real job. And oftentimes the people who work in these projects are leaders on their home campuses. So they're carrying a heavy burden when they come to the meeting. So I think one of the things we did with the history professional learning community is we talked about getting some release time from the participating school districts, and they meet at 3:30 in the afternoon. That was a recommendation made to me by Shelley Valdez and the CalPass project. All their meetings start earlier, and it allows teachers to come to the meeting straight from work. It's not a delay between meeting times, and they don't have to go home, come back. It's a situation where they get home earlier. It seems to work well for that group. The other issue that sometimes doesn't allow for that is some of your teachers at the college level are teaching classes till 4:30 in the afternoon. Some of them have night classes. So it's not always possible. This is a huge issue, and it's something that you're going to have to work through when you think about beginning a project like that. When I came in December, I actually really didn't meet with the 4 teams, all 4 teams, until the round of meetings in January. I heard from several of the teams that, we're really, even at this point in the game, we're not really sure what we're supposed to be doing. It seems that it's a lot easier for folks in the math committee to understand the data, how to use the data. It's a little more complex when you start talking about social studies and curriculums that aren't aligned vertically. The first meeting I went to, I heard a professor from UTSA, we were talking about standards and aligning standards, and so I posed the question. I said, well, what are the standards for 1301 or whatever you call your entry-level American history course? And he's like, well, it's whatever the teacher decides. Okay, well, that's a challenge. We will have to. It's kind of hard to hit the target when there's that many targets out there. So that's a huge issue, and so early on we've got to make sure that everybody knows we are a professional learning community. Professional learning communities function in a very specific way. It begins by learning. That middle word, professional learning community, that's the most important part of it. And so there's got to be a clear understanding that we're here to learn about what the issues are before we ever begin to start thinking about strategies for intervention. And I think that's something that really needs to be emphasized in the beginning. I probably, if I were going to start a program right now, I'd want to spend a day or two at least training everybody in the project so that we're all on the same page, we're all using the same vocabulary, we know what our focus is, we know how we're going to do the work. There's not going to be any question about it. Everybody has clear understanding of their role, co-chairs included. And then we start looking at research, book studies. I mean, Connolly's written a great book. I'm sure you've seen it, College Knowledge. Gosh, we'd have had everybody read that book to start with. We could have saved a lot of time. So in terms of lessons learned, make sure that you do a good job of clarifying what the team goals are going to be early on. I already talked about the roles. The co-chairs are critical in this work. Regional coordinators really are not designed to go in and try to tell people what to do. In fact, if you go in and try to tell these teachers what they should be thinking about or doing, you won't be having many of them return. It's not our place to tell them what to do. We're there to facilitate the conversation, pose questions. And we're kind of like an assistant coach in the press box. We're there to sit there and observe the work that's going on, make sure that everything is going in the right direction, and then sometimes you may have to go down on the field and intervene if things start going the wrong direction. But our role as a regional coordinator, in my view, is one that is there to coach people and help them pose the right questions. And that's not an easy thing to do. Most of the folks from the K-12 side are not data researchers. They look at data, and they have to. But when it comes to looking at it from a perspective that thinks about what can we do with this data to improve transition, they're not really used to thinking about it in that way. And so that's a great benefit to have Colby as a resource, because they'll send a request for data and then he'll clarify the issue and say, what are you trying to get at here? That's helped a lot. But some training in that area up front would be a good idea. How'd that happen? Oh, are you playing games? I recently had a long conversation, and it was documented in an email that I shared it with Kobe. This is a serious barrier as it stands right now. I think as time moves forward and as college readiness becomes a more integral part of the accountability system, there's going to be more emphasis at the K-12 level. Right now, they're in survival mode as standards for success are raised on a progressive yearly basis. their focus is on their own accountability system. It's human nature. As I've already said, those two things don't always add up to college readiness. And so this is a struggle in some cases because most of the folks I deal with at the coordinator level in school districts are busy people. They have very focused time. They have more work than they have time to do. And this is, in some cases, an add-on for them. And even leadership at the very highest levels doesn't always see how this fits in with the work they're already doing. So we have to spend a lot of time having conversations with the folks in the highest level of the secondary organizational structure so that we get their support. Without it, it's not going to go anywhere. What can we do at this level to support your teams? It's really important. The first thing that happened when I came into the project working with the science professional learning community was they were working on a bridge project for science freshmen coming out of high school. They developed the concept. They were working. They created a budget. Somehow, somewhere along the way, they were given the impression that there was a budget to pay for this bridge project. And when I found out that that's what they were doing, and I started looking for the money, it turns out there really wasn't any money for the bridge project. So it's really going to be important for this work to move forward, to have some money available to support the ideas that the teams come up with in terms of interventions. We have identified a grant writer in San Antonio. I've set up communication with the Alamo colleges, and they are supportive of the concept, to contract with her to look for and write grants to support this work. I actually considered writing an I-3 grant this year, but we couldn't pull 6 partners in a college district and a university together in 3 weeks. So we're going to prepare, have all our ducks in a row, and have that everything we need to secure a proposal for that grant when it's released next year. I think the SharePoint website's going to be a real great way. Once we teach people, Kobe and I, actually Kobe did the training at the last meetings that we had for the end of the year on how to get onto the website, how to use it. There are still folks who struggle with using a site like this, but I think if we can convince them to start going to that website regularly and they start to see the work they're doing posted up there for the world to see, that's another big question they have. Who's looking at this? Where is it going to go? Is somebody going to react to some of the ideas that we have? So that website's going to be a great tool in helping build efficacy in the mindsets of the people doing the work. Because if we want them to keep coming to these meetings after they work all day, they're going to have a sense that this is going to make a difference. I think that in the folks that have stuck it out and who are still doing this work, they are some of the most committed people I've ever been around. It's been a real joy to get to know them and to work with them because this is hard work and it's after work. And so that website's going to be a great support piece. And then I think our teams will be developing white papers and we'll be posting all the work they do, artifacts that provide evidence to the kind of thinking that they're looking at, so that anybody else who's doing the same kind of work can learn from that website. But we really do need to find other resources to support this kind of work. The math team, in the time allotted today, I don't have time to share with you everything all 4 committees have worked on, but the math team I really did want to focus on, and Kobe's already alluded to some of the success that they've had. We had 2 really great co-chairs in this case. One of them happens to be a data researcher, and I think that helped the cause. She knew how to ask the right questions. She's also a very strong personality, and so she kept the team focused. And so this really is a model of what we would like to replicate. If you could replicate what happened with this group in the course of their work, this would be a good model to follow. They looked at the college readiness assessments in college. They looked to identify the misalignment. It's and you'll see the results of their work as we move toward completion of this school year. In fact, they're working on the white paper as we speak. These are some of the interventions that they came up with to provide short-term solutions. Everywhere I go, it doesn't matter where I go, that word is a bad word, acuplacer. It's just we had our math participants take the acuplacer, and they learned a lot from it. What they learned was, to their amazement, is that not only does it correctly identify or not correctly identify students for college algebra, it's not aligned to either one. And so we're giving a placement test that is not accurately placing kids where they need to be in math. It's a huge frustration for them. When they found out about it, they were, who can we talk to? We need to get on this right away. Joe Laser identified this issue a long time ago. I don't know where decisions like that are made. I just know that they are passionate about the need to change that. Informing high school teachers about the expectations of the test. In other words, what they finally decided was, well, look, okay, we don't have any control over that. So what can we do to help kids and teachers provide students with strategies for doing better on the test so they're not placed in the wrong developmental course? The other thing that they feel strongly about is we do need to pursue the concept of dual credit at the high school level. The more kids we get in those higher levels of math, Joe Laser at UTSA is convinced that we need to deal with this problem before they get to college. It's just it's an opinion that not everyone shares, but it makes sense that the more kids that could get that credit before they get to the college level, the fewer we're going to have experience that as a barrier to success for college graduation. One of the things that the math group did was look at placement alternatives. They created a matrix of different kinds of information that they could use to help accurately identify students for the right math course. And I'll post that on the website so you can look at it. I thought that was a very creative solution to getting at a possible way for kids to contest the decision of that test. The acuplacer. If they didn't agree with it, what things could we look at in combination that might provide better evidence about which math course you really should be in? And they're all for exploring what should be in a culminating college math course. I think there's a pretty broad consensus beginning to develop that not everyone needs to take the, quote, college algebra. One of the huge disconnects between the secondary and post-secondary systems, of course, is technology. We had some really spirited conversations about that in our math group. There's a gentleman who is absolutely convinced that he knows best, and the reason that kids are not successful in college algebra is because we teach them how to use a graphing calculator in high school. And of course we had to explain, because he didn't know, he was not aware of the fact that we are required to do that. And I think if there was a big aha that came out of this work in the first couple of years, it's how little the post-secondary system professors and teachers knew about what challenges the K-12 teachers had. That was a huge, huge aha. They were like, when they realized, just to give you an example of it, recently a discussion was happening, and one of the high school teachers was talking about how she was trying to cope with 10 or 12 kids in her classroom who had identified learning disabilities, and at the same time she's charged with the responsibility of achieving high standards for all kids, and she was talking about diversified, differentiated instruction. She kept using the term repeatedly. And finally, one of the professors raised his hand and said, "What are you talking about? What is differentiated instruction?" That's a clear, it really made it clear to me that there's huge cultural differences that are going to have to be bridged if this kind of work is going to really make a difference. And I agree with the grant evaluator who was in San Antonio last week as we talked about this issue. I don't think, even if we align curriculum and assessment, and we look at data that's generated statewide, we're going to have to align instruction too. There's some serious pedagogical issues in the differences of these two systems, and for us to continue to accept a view of instruction at the post-secondary level of consistently one way to approach teaching for learning, I think that's going to be an issue. These are some of the ideas that came out of that math group's conversation in the beginning. These are some comments that they made at the end of the year. They're not all of them. We just threw some comments in here so you can see what they learned. I think that third one is really important. You know, we can look at the data all we want to. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We need the data to inform our decision making. We need the data to help guide our thinking. But the solutions are going to have to be big. We can do little things at each level. But if we're really going to change the number of kids who make the successful transition from high school to college, it's going to take big systemic changes. We have to start thinking about, why do we have two separate systems? It makes sense to me. I learned from Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe that any time you take on a project, you need to begin with the end in mind. And so when you're trying to align standards between two separate and distinct systems, it's kind of hard to do that if there aren't any to align to. So we might want to rethink systemically how we finance education, how we assess it, how we create standards, and work backwards. It'll certainly speed the process, in my opinion. So I've summarized briefly. I wanted to once again thank the coordinating board and Colby and Kristen. Dr. Leslie's vision, I think, is the one who kind of pushed this project along in the beginning. Dr. Fabianchi at the Alamo College has been extremely helpful and supportive of this work, and I really like her because she hired me. The partners are the most critical piece. Without the dedicated, passionate teachers that come to do this work, it just wouldn't be going anywhere. So I thank you, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them at this time.
Thank you. Regarding, the interventions, I guess, once you get to that stage, and I guess I'm asking, when do you start engaging leadership, policymakers in the process in terms of recognition for the folks that are at the grassroots level, your team members, support, resources. I mean, funding is obviously going to be a big issue when you get to the intervention phase, but also the actual buy-in and recognition that this really is going somewhere, and it's not only important to the P16 component of this, but also to your workforce, to your economic development, to your economy of your local area. So I'm just wondering, have you developed any kind of strategies in terms of quarterly reports going out to partner institutions in terms of, engaging your city and your economic development, those kind of things?
That's a really good question. I talked to the... I have to also give credit to the folks at Cal Pass. Shelley Valdez and Jordan Horowitz have been good resources for me, and when I had questions, they were always willing to talk to me. And that's one of the things that I posed that exact question to Shelley Valdez. And we are going to create, I'm working on the first quarterly newsletter that will go out to school districts, and I'm glad you brought up the idea of the workforce, because I think we do need to engage that part of the public in that conversation. And so, yes, ma'am.
I was just going to add to that I just learned also from Houston that they've been focusing on getting information then back to the very vibrant P16 Council in Houston and getting that reports back to a lot of the business leaders and focusing on these are some particular things that need to happen for us to make some shifts. So really engaging other groups.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we learned. We also need to include in the Pathways team members, people that represent decision-making policy at the district level. I mean, they need to hear it. It's very difficult for a teacher to go back to a campus and work their way all the way through those channels all the way to the top and say, hey, we got this great idea. It helps to have people who are already embedded at the higher levels to be a part of the conversation, and they can get that kind of thing done quicker. Yes, sir.
Can you flesh that out a little bit more of what the problems you found with that, that it didn't truly represent a good...
Well, I can only tell you what they said. It's not aligned. Dr. Laser actually brought the acuplacers into UTSA and had a conversation with them about it. It's not aligned to place kids in college algebra. Neither is it aligned to the curriculum. Amazingly enough, there's two major differences in the curriculum at the K-12 system and at the college level. At the K-12 system, they use a multiple multiple representations approach to instruction, and at the college level it's not that way. And so, but the actual curriculum itself is not aligned, and so we're basically using a placement tool that doesn't serve either side of this cultural divide well. We've got kids that are taking DE courses that shouldn't be, and we've got kids testing out of them that shouldn't be. And so neither one of those two things contribute to success in college algebra. And as Kobe so accurately pointed out, the more DE courses a student has to take, the less chance of the likelihood that they're ever going to finish.
Well, I'm intrigued by something you just said, and yet on that list of observations from this group, they want to put in a prep course.
Well,
that doesn't matter if it's not. You see what I'm getting at? In other words, you're almost saying
that's a short-term solution.
So you prep them out of it. I mean, didn't I just point out that the tax test prep is a faulty way of handling the that issue, and we're going to talk about prepping. It's just not making any sense.
Honestly, they're not really all excited about that. It's just they're trying to think of a short-term solution. These folks are focused on helping their kids be successful. They don't want them taking DE classes they don't need to be taking. And so if they can do something to help, what's happening is a lot of kids, by the time they finish high school, they're so tested out, they're just done with it. And they go over to college. They've graduated from high school with the idea that they're ready to go to college. And they get there, and somebody says, "Oop, time out. You didn't score high enough on the tax test. We got to give you this math test." Well, they'll just sit down and fill it out. They're like, they don't understand the importance of what's going to happen to them when they don't take that test seriously. The other thing is, there are questions on that test they've never been taught before. They cover mathematical concepts that are not taught in the high school curriculum. So the teachers are caught between a rock and a hard place. We've got kids that have to take this test, so we can ignore it and just wish them the best. Or we can say, okay, nothing else, we're going to help you at least do better on this test, even though it's not part of the curriculum we teach. They actually wait until after the tax test is over, and in the time that's remaining, like right now, they'll call in the kids that they know are going to struggle, and they'll try to say, look, you're going to see this on this test. It's not something we've covered, but this is what you need to know in order to be successful, so you don't get stuck in a class you don't need to take. That solution is not a long-term solution, but you're not going to find a dedicated high school teacher who really cares about their kids that's not going to do that.
Don't you think the college readiness standards for math, though, are a solution? Kristen sitting here and has convinced us that is a solution. You just simply use that as a model for success in high school mathematics.
The question had to do I think whether or not the college readiness standards are a solution. I think they're a beginning. I'm not a mathematician, so I do know very well Linda Gann, someone who took part in the development of the college readiness standards, and she's always quick to point out that that's not a laundry list of skills that kids need to be successful in college. It simply is a predictor of success. The more of those things that they can master, the more likely they'll be successful in college. And she also points out that it's not just college readiness, it's career readiness. That's why so many of the suggestions that the math team has come up with is focused on developing math courses that make sense for kids depending on the career path they choose. They don't all need to be taking the same college algebra course, in their opinion.
I have one more question, and it's come up a couple times in the discussions, and it's, I guess, centers around study skills. I like to call them soft skills. There was the high school survey, and I'm not sure if that relates to this same topic or not, but, and I don't know if this is for you or Colby, but is there any discussion about how the Pathways Project can really start to get our arms around that? Because I have, in our P16 Council, one of our most exciting committees is workforce readiness, and these guys are not talking about the core stuff. They are talking about these soft skills, and wherever these students drop out of the pipeline, whether it's after high school or after technical college or after 4-year, they feel like they don't have those soft skills, and that's really what the college and career readiness interdisciplinary skills
That's right.
begin to address anyway, and I haven't seen that anywhere discussed in the Pathways Project.
Well, it didn't. It's not as big an issue with the math folks. Their focus has really been on curriculum alignment and where are the disconnects. The other three groups, that's pretty much all they talk about. I didn't know what soft skills were until I went to the first meeting, and I kept hearing the term, and I finally said, what are you talking about? I think Claire Ellen Weinstein has clearly defined what those things are. She calls them strategic learning skills. And she actually assesses 10 different characteristics, including things like reading for meaning, tenacity, motivation. These are hard to assess skills, but they're critical to success whether you're in school or in work. And the truth of the matter is, when you start thinking about it and looking back at what we've done in K-12, it's so focused on trying to survive the accountability system, we really haven't done a lot of work in that area. Claire Ellen came down and did a presentation to our group about her research regarding strategic thinking, or she calls it strategic learning skills. And I think it's really at the heart of some of the strategies we need to focus on as early as probably 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Somehow or another, there's no reason why we can't build those concepts and those skills into the process. It's just no reason. We really have a moral and ethical obligation to do that. Kids get to college and they don't know how to manage time, and they don't really have clear, thought-out goals that guide their decision making. And so that's a huge issue for science, social studies. They talk about it constantly. It's not been as big an issue with math, but the other three groups definitely have identified exactly the same thing. And so we're going to be, I think the AVID project has some real possibilities in assisting us in that area, but we're definitely focused on addressing those very issues that you raise.
Yes. Like I said, we're pulling markers in for the AVID teams, and we're also looking at how AVID students just in secondary learning those skills is a big part of the AVID program. And also we are looking at actual data so we can make it more readily available. Is this a predictor of success? So we are actually getting that information and from Claire Ellen and showing, okay, a student who has high levels of learning strategy, good study skills, low test anxiety, motivation is performing better, and how that's tied to performance and doing all these kind of controls, really to bring it to a highlight that this is an issue that needs to be focused on. And Claire Ellen Weinstein has been great about supplying us with data, tying it to our outcomes, and also engaging in professional development in San Antonio.
I believe my time is up.
All right. At this point in the agenda, we're basically going to give you the idea of what kind of some of the starter projects. In your package, you'll see that we have a sample MOU. We'll give you that as a startup. It's a thing that we have been reviewed by our legal counsel. It's a way for us to do the data sharing agreements. And also, if you need any help with those kinds of documents, please come to us. Also in the documents right now, I also put the user guide for data for Houston. And basically that's what we give faculty teams to outline the variables that we have in the project so they know and can start thinking about types of questions to ask based on the information we have. But as I went down to Houston and spoke this week, I told them our data requests are not just tied to those variables. Be imaginative, send us in questions, and we'll work through the solutions. In addition to there, I also put a job description for a regional coordinator. And it basically gives an outline, something that we used to define what is the skills of a regional coordinator. And like I said, Tripp has them in spades. What Tripp was bringing up, all the San Antonio stuff, what is really nice is we always say San Antonio was our pilot. And what was really nice, all the things we learned from the previous evaluation, we put into effect in Houston. And now Houston is going through a lot less of those bumps that we had in the road in San Antonio. We got a nice MOU this time, data sharing agreements. We have teams focusing on team development, establishing their goals very early, developing what it means to be a co-chair, and those are our leaders of our faculty teams, what it means to be a regional coordinator. And actually they started off with interventions that were done in San Antonio and developed in San Antonio. They started off by taking their college readiness assessment test, and they added one. They made everyone take the TAKS test so that people could actually see and compare those two differences. So, and one thing with the Pathways Project, we're always in a constant cycle of evaluation. We hire a third-party evaluator to go to our teams, and that's the kind of information we want. And we like to hear this kind of information because all it's going to do is make us better. Things like the SharePoint system came out of that evaluation. Different kinds of data reports came out of that evaluation. And we actually send surveys to all the faculty team members with and they're all anonymous and say, give it to faculty team members. I'll tell you one thing, they're honest. And it's a good thing to have in the pathway system. So people who are coming on new, we're even organizing right now a summer workshop with all of our regional coordinators, where we're going to take all this paperwork that we've developed in the time of Pathways and condense it into one manual for a new team member, new teams, and also just interventions. We're going to develop websites on interventions that are going across the Pathways teams, and we're also going to put up a website about what data requests have other teams asked for, so we can sort of give ideas for other teams. And then we're going to start a system where if one data request comes out from one team, we're going to launch the system and send it to all the teams so they can all receive that same kind of information.
Kobe, we had some feedback from Pat Bubb, the Executive Director for Tech Prep in the Rio Grande Valley, regarding soft skills. Just to share with the group, she says you might take a look at ACT work keys as a possibility for implementing the soft skills this group is talking about right now. So I wanted to share that with the group.
Perfect. Also, when the cameras were off, there were other questions that were brought up, and also some questions from the website that we want to sort of cover right now. First one is that in the Pathways project, when we start the data collection, we do about 7 physical years of archival data. We collect 7 years back. So when we first launch the program, we do 7 years worth of data collection so that we have this continuous flow. We can look at these course patterns going across higher education and the secondary system. The new data collection system for the state starts in the summer of 2011, and that's our first pilot engagement system. The key thing is what we're going to try to do we're going to tie that new data system with archival data from Pathways. So starting with that system, what we're going to do is basically there will be no more data submissions that are needed for the Pathways program from higher ed, because we're going to have that data that would be traditionally collected in Pathways. Not to say that we're going to have to do secondary collections, such on markers for students that are in projects and so forth, but we'll have that information, but we will still have the connection to resources like data researchers that can go into that system and view your system and pull that information out. Yeah, the new system won't have the archival data. So there is still some effort up front to pull that information out from people's databases. One of the things we brought up, I wanted to bring up too, that with the AccuPlacer, the math team came up with some very interesting things. Like the first question was something that no one learned in high school. And it's a computer adaptive test. So if you miss the first question, you drop a level in difficulty, so your score automatically goes down. And so one of the things the math team, real simple solution is, can we move that question to another area, or that topic area to another part of the test at least, so that it can start off with a question that would give the students more confidence in the test, rather than getting a question that they most likely weren't going to be able to get. And that has been it. Are there any other questions in the audience? And also, if we can flash the email up to see. And of course, we'll respond to emails at any time, Tori. If you have questions after this meeting, we can go for it.
So, in one sentence, what's the goal of Pathways?
Successful student transition from secondary to post-secondary. And also successful transition from secondary into workforce. I mean, I would say that this is the goal of the region also. What is the goal? And then that goal is then narrowed down to target focus areas by the region.
I realize the coordinating board has data from the colleges, but on the data from the high school or the secondary, is it obtainable from existing sources, or do the high schools have to resubmit data for 7 years? That seems like a burden that they would make it hard to sell.
The high schools do submit the data. I can give you just examples. The 6 in San Antonio We have one complete set from El Paso. We have 5 complete sets from Houston. So we do ask for this 7 years back. We go in and for long targeted teams, and we go in through every single item that we're requesting, how it's going to be pulled in from their system, if there are going to be any difficulties. And there are sometimes difficulties with archival data, but we work with that and work with the transition of systems. You know, we'll have a school that 4 years ago, they switched their systems entirely, and it's going to be difficult to pull that information. So we work with those schools in extending timelines and getting information. It's not really accessible from our current statewide systems from the high school and the secondary system because they don't produce grade information. In addition, we also collect information on summer courses to get a complete college pattern. But we found out that once we get through that first data collection cycle, that first system cycle, it takes about 4 to 5 months to get set up, that the next data system cycle, for the next fiscal year, we get data back quickly. In San Antonio, all I have to do is send out a system-wide email. It's time to submit your data reports for this fiscal year, and it's done. So we work through a lot of those processes and those bumps. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for attending. Remember, you know, as you're going back home or whatever, if you have any questions, please email either Kristen or I, and we'd be more than happy to respond.